ANZ's predicting a house price crash and then a bounce back. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee and let's look at this article written by John McCarthy for In Queensland. So bank tips more house price falls next year before a 2024 bounce back. Now let's have a look at some property prices. Let's look at SQM asking prices in, we'll do all capital cities. We'll do all capital cities here. And you can see, okay, the asking prices have certainly climbed. Okay, people are asking a lot more from 2020. But if we go back to 2018, 2017, it's dipped down a bit there, but it's just certainly climbed up. We're not quite at $1 million anymore. We've come down from it. This is the decrease that everyone's worried about that's going on now. But it's still going to need a bit of a move to get back to 2019 levels when even then house prices were not affordable, everyone. Well, not as affordable as they were in the past. So let's have a look. Because if we're talking about a fall but housing's gone up to the moon, like it has during the pandemic lockdown period, it's not going to make much difference, is it? Not if you're struggling. So the bank, which is at odds with other forecasts tipping an increase in house prices next year, said across the capitals house prices had fallen 6% below their peak in March. We continue to expect a peak-to-trough decline in prices of 15 to 20%, the bank said. Now, this is after it's shot right up. So we're still not going to be that far back in time. Okay, you need to think about this as how far back in time we're going. Oh, no, 20%, it sounds terrible, but you're going up 30. So what are we at, 2019, maybe 2018? See, this is the thing. If you're waiting for a major correction in the housing sector, there is a lot of support there. There's a lot of support. And, I mean, we can't dismiss the fact that if we get tough economic times, our politicians won't just intervene and use the housing market as a tool to stimulate the economy again. I would argue that's expected now at this point. Am I wrong in expecting that? You tell me. What do you think? So, because honestly, I think all the talk of housing affordability coming from the political class, it's all just lip service. They're never going to address it because, well, everyone says they want housing affordability, but they say they want it, It's like they say they want to buy Australian made, but at the checkouts, everyone's a globalist. So it expects the RBA would bring its increases in the cash rate to a halt in May when it hits 3.85%. However, about 62% of the current fixed rate loans are expected to end in mid-2023 and roll over into a higher interest rates and repayments. And we've looked at that on the channel. You're talking about 40% increase in your repayments. So it's going to be a big slog, a big hit. But I mean, I'm one of those people. I got in at 1.99, locked it in, primarily to stop me paying off my mortgage and to use my money on my renovations, and also because I thought we're never going to see rates this low again. I didn't think it'll go negative. And now that was from the advice or the quotes from Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe saying how ineffective negative rates are. So I thought, oh, well, he's never going to go negative then, as long as he's in power. He's seen now on Europe that it hasn't worked. Only we could learn other lessons from Europe. We think that most of the impact on prices will be fully reflected by the end of 2023. In 2024, as policies stabilizes and then eases late in the year, we expect to see a modest recovery begin to emerge in house prices and look for gains of around 5% by the end of 2024. The bank's economist Felicity Emmett and Adelaide Timbrell said. The biggest factor driving down prices is reduced borrowing capacity, not a rise in forced sales. There you go. That's one of the most important takeaways from this. It's borrowing capacities going down. It's not people being forced to sell. So if you're sitting there expecting a huge crash and people forced to sell in the market, you've got to understand homeowners and investors will do whatever they can to hold on to their property. to the point where we get a significant number of people forced to sell, that's going to be a time period. And I would argue in that period, there'd be enough hoo-ha in the media and political push to, should we say, intervene or stimulate, or maybe a new investment program. I don't know, maybe shared equity. Let Albo buy part of your house. Oh, shit. It's got to be Mortgage Keeper, isn't it? That was a joke. A tight rental market, rising immigration, and low unemployment will help to mitigate weakness in housing demand. You also have to understand new builds are going to increase in costs due to legislative changes. The bank has also forecast housing construction to fall by 10% next year, which was better than its previous forecast of 15%. Its predictions for house prices in 2023 was a fall of just over 10% in Brisbane, which is similar to other capitals. Adelaide was the outlier with a fall of 20%. SQM Research has forecast a recovery in house prices next year, well ahead of the ANZ forecast. SQM said capital city increase would be between 3 and 7%. So we're getting some discussions of what's essentially a bounce back. What's a bounce back? Let's have a talk about this. So, house price falls not driven by forced sales, driven by reduced borrowing capacity, and calls of the market bouncing back in 2024. I wonder if we hit a recession, if the Reserve Bank will start cutting rates again to stimulate the economy. There's predictions of us getting one in 2023. I mean, it's all up in the air. And here's the thing, if you're waiting there clamoring for a big correction, will you see it? Will you see it? To really address housing affordability and the cost of housing, you need to drastically increase supply. You need to reduce red tape. You need to reduce the legislative changes. But that's not the culture we have here in Australia. We've just now, new legislation has come through with livability standards and energy efficiency standards for housing. That sounds fantastic. It's all nice and good. The sound bites are great. All the young people will love it. They'll vote for it and go, yes, we need houses to be more energy efficient. Yes, we need every house to be accessible by a wheelchair. All of these things. The problem is that drives up the cost for the houses. The energy efficiency requirement increases the cost, and it's questionable the payback period. If the additional cost of installing infrastructure in your building to mitigate energy usage is actually worth it over the lifespan of the building. I remember looking at that at university and it didn't seem to make sense. The payback period seemed like crazy, but particularly with the lifespan of houses. Now the accessibility requirements, I can appreciate that, particularly having a father who needed to access a house with a wheelchair and we had to get him over the threshold. It was a bit of extra work. But that is something you can retrofit to buildings as people age in place. It's not something you need to put in every building because that's going to drive up costs. These new changes are estimated to drive up build costs by $30,000 per building. And that's going to add support to the entire housing market because if you buy a new build, you've got to, that's going to impact the demand for established dwellings because you don't need to put up with all those requirements now. But that's just the way it is in Australia, guys. I can't see it changing. I cannot see the culture changing in Australia, particularly with the way younger people are voting. Much more interventionist, much more, definitely much more interventionist, much more left-leaning. They want bigger government. They want more government involvement. They think government will bring the solutions. Whereas I'd argue that, you get to a point, you want a kind of a caretaker government to make sure the field is fair. But if it starts encroaching, picking winners and choosers and making enforcements, there's extra costs that are associated with that. And that's going to push people out of owning houses. Moving forward, you're certainly going to have a class distinction between those who own property and those who don't. Australia's just turning into Europe. It's not going to be the Australia of previous generations. Let me know your thoughts on this one, guys. As always, thanks for watching. Check out HeiseBim and HeiseSays International for other topics I discuss. And if you're a fan and want to support the channel, you can financially on YouTube or Patreon. Use our referral links, buy our pocket squares, or call us if you need an architect. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next episode of HeiseSays.